then. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai ki te hui o te kainihira o Pōniki I tēnei rā. Welcome everybody to today's Pūroro Maherehere Annual Plan Long-Term Plan Committee meeting. I'll start with a karakia to open the meeting. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauriora. As always, please let us know, me or the Democracy Advisor, if you wish to leave the meeting. And there's a trick with my first chair's notes to say morning tea will be at 10:30, but obviously it's afternoon. So I'm assuming afternoon tea will be probably at 3 p.m, depending on how we go. So, right, so we'll get on to the apologies. Have we got any apologies for this meeting? You haven't received any, Sean?
No.
Okay, all right. We're all here then. That's fantastic. And conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflict of interest declarations for this meeting? No. All right. We'll move on to the minutes, and we will approve the minutes of Pūroro Maherehere held on 18th of November 2021. Having been circulated and maybe taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Free, thank you. And if you could all vote, that would be great.
And that is carried unanimously.
Thank you. There are no items not on the agenda, so we'll move forward to public participation. I'd like to welcome Alex Stein, if you're online, to talk about vaccine mandates, and you have 5 minutes, and that includes any time for questions. So if you want some questions, go under the 5 minutes. Okay, you there, Alex? Thank you.
Hey guys, so I have a really unique situation that is really troubling. So I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. My wife and I, she is a New Zealander. I married her. I moved to New Zealand. I got COVID for the 3rd time. I'm here. I work at a vaccination clinic. I've been boosted 3 times. I got COVID at the beginning, right around March when it first happened. I was hospitalized. Ever since I got COVID, I've been impotent. I haven't been able to make love to my wife. And so now I'm facing this time of needs where I'm trying to see her, and she left and she took the kids and she's not in America. So I'm stuck in a foreign country by myself, having no idea what to do. And I need your help, because I'm telling you guys, the reason why she left me is because I can't make love to her and I'm stuck in New Zealand by myself. And I don't know what to do, and I'm so alone. And I tried the dating app, and nobody is doing anything with this crazy exactly. They won't even talk to me. I miss her so much. I can still smell the vodka on her breath when she kissed me goodbye. I just miss my son so much. I miss my daughter. I just want to go back to Texas. You New Zealanders are sick people. Why do you do this to me? I sit and I cry every night. And I pray, and I say, God, please bring her back. I don't even care that she used to abuse me. She used to make me do things sexually that I'd never tried before.
Excuse me, Mr. Stein, could we please mute the submitter for a moment?
Yeah,
excuse me. Services, could we please mute the submitter for a second? I'm just wondering if there's anything that you want to tell us about the council's vaccine mandates. Otherwise, we might have
you don't understand. It's the mandates that made her leave. It's Jacinda that made her leave. And I wouldn't go to America, and it's your fault. If you didn't have these mandates, you would have left me. I wouldn't be by myself, crying myself to sleep every night. So I thank you, Jacinda, for breaking up my home, for making me alone. alone. I cry at night.
Okay, Democracy
I was
Services,
sober
could
for
we please
13
mute
years.
this submission? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stein. I'm not sure quite how that was relevant to our meeting.
No, don't do
but
this
can we
to
please,
me, please.
Democracy Services, can we please mute this matter?
Jacinda, no, Jacinda, please. Please, just show.
I think that's the end of that, and we'll continue on with our meeting. We move on to general business, the annual plan, draft plan and budget. And as obviously we had quite a fulsome debate and introduction last week, officers are going to assume the paper is read and we'll move straight to questions. So could we please take questions from councillors if you have any about the annual plan, draft plan and budget? Councillor Fitzsimons.
Thank you. Yeah, I did have a few questions. There's around community centres, some fees and a capital question. But just the first one is on page 13, where it talks about community centre upgrades, inflationary pressure on budgets that have been carried forward from previous years and increased accessibility requirements. It's sort of upgraded community centres has been on the agenda ever since I was elected to council and constantly kind of delayed. And I guess I'm just interested in how we've fixed the problems that have led to, for example, Newtown, but I know it's others as well, kind of always being on the agenda and never quite complete.
All right, have we got someone available to answer, Councillor Fitzsimons?
Through you, Chair. Unfortunately, our Chief Customer and Community Officer, Kim Fell, is unable to be here today, but we may have a member of the finance team here who has some insight. However, I can tell you that I'm very aware of the issue Councillor Fitzsimons has raised, and we have most certainly worked on a program that will see these projects advance in a more timely way under the oversight of the Project Management Office. Mr. MacArthur or Deirdre, have you anything to add?
Yeah, so we, and I can get some more clarity after the meeting and send it through exactly on which community centres are now contracted. But we are in a position, you'll remember when we went through the carry forward process, we carried forward, there wasn't actually budget for those in the LTP because they were actually in last year. So we carried forward that budget into the current year. And we spoke about that when we did the capital programme rescheduling, because we wanted to ensure we had the budget there for the centres that we are now contracting to be completed. Through that procurement process, we have found, and through some variation in terms of the accessibility, we have found that there are some cost escalations, and that's what that additional 2.5 million relates to. But we're happy to give more detail on that afterwards. But there is good progress being made, spend has started, and we have procurement contracts in place.
And my next question was around the additional support for earthquake-prone buildings, because obviously we just in the long-term plan reduced this by, I think the amount that you're now proposing, we increase it by back again. And although there was that resolution which said additional support to owners, I'm just wondering what the evidence base is for the officer advice that this is the kind of additional support that's actually likely to deal with the public policy problem we have, because it's, you know, like what evidence is there that a 50% refund on resource consent fees or a 50% refund on road usage licence applications is likely to lead to the outcomes we want? And what other things were considered that perhaps don't have a financial impact?
Perhaps if Liam's online, he could respond to that.
Sorry, I am online, councillors, but unfortunately missed the question.
It's really just the earthquake-prone buildings. So we, just in the LTP, we took out the very amount of money that you're now proposing to put back in. And I'm just wondering what the evidence base is for officers' assertions that a 50% refund on resource consent fees and a 50% refund on road user licence applications will deal with the public policy problem that we're trying to solve here, and what other options were considered, and any that were considered that didn't have a financial impact. And look, I'm happy to get it, to get feedback on notice. It just seems surprising to me that we just took out that money and now we're putting it back in.
Yeah, Councillor Fitzsimons, I think what I'll do is I'll take that question on notice and get officers to report back.
Yeah, that would be good. So ideally, because we're voting on it today, soon would be good. My other one really, there were just 2 user charges I had questions about, all the ones around botanical gardens and who those would impact. So things that we weren't charging for before. And then just the dog euthanization. I just had some questions around same sort of nature. What are the public policy implications of that, and how many do other councils charge it, and if we assess the risks that would come from the implications of charging for that, and is it sort of something that those frontline workers are proposing? Where's that come from? Bit of background on those new charges.
Again, councillors, I think I might come back to you on that question if that's okay.
All right, is that the end of your question? Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Look, one of the things that we note that we are on this current information, we're projecting a 9.1% rates rise on average. Can somebody from finance just clarify what that means for on average for residential ratepayers and what that means for commercial ratepayers?
I can probably answer that, but Richard may be able to help as well. Councillor, as you'll be aware at this stage, it's very difficult to estimate what that impact will be split across different types of ratepayers. We need to be able to get the final valuations uploaded in the system so that we can run that through the models and ensure we're giving accurate information. Until such time as we are really clear on what the final valuations are that we're using for the rate strike, it's very difficult to give an estimate.
And when will that be then?
Richard may be able to help us with that.
Look, we're hoping to have that advice for you for the March meeting.
Right, okay, thank you. And then my other question is, you factored in the rephasing of some of our capital expenditure budget from decision made late last calendar year. Are you planning on perhaps including any further rephasing of the capital budget over the next, from what you find out over the next month before we finalise the draft annual plan consultation document?
Councillor Calvert, we're not planning to do any further rephasing at this stage, but we are closely monitoring the Capital Works program in the current environment. Siobhan Proctor may wish to add a couple of observations. Siobhan, are you there? Yes. I think you're on mute, Siobhan. I don't think that's working, Councillor Fitzsimons. Oh, sorry, Councillor Calvert. But at this stage, we're not planning to bring a further report to you on rephasing. But as I said, we're closely monitoring.
Okay.
Perhaps, Councillor Calvert, I could add that in the March 8 report, we will bring kind of year-to-date information on OPEX spend and CapEx. So at least you'll have that information.
Okay, and just one final question. There was some talk about the council remitting library fines. Is officers doing any work on this, whether that can apply this year or the next financial year?
So in terms of, sorry, Stephen.
I was just going to say, I think that would depend on resolutions today, whether or not we can report back on the 8th of March.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's all.
We can now come back to Councillor Fitzsimon's question that wasn't answered by Mr. Hodgetts. I understand, Liam, that you're online now to answer that one.
I am, and apologies, Councillor Fitzsimon. So just on the first question, building resilience, I caught the end of it, unfortunately. I was a little distracted, but it is actually Siobhan Proctor. So she can answer that question when she gets her tech online. So apologies for that vacant stare I gave. Just quickly on the dog control matters. So we've got a couple of things happening here. First relates to the euthanasia fees for dogs. So we euthanize about 25 dogs a year, and the weight of the dogs is very dependent on the charges that would normally be put. In this instance, we are staggering that charge to reflect the aspect of euthanasia and how we actually euthanize the dogs in terms of the action. The next one relates to the dog walkers. So there has been quite a bit of feedback from long established dog walkers in Wellington wanting to potentially certify, if you like, the amount of companies out there. So we've had a few queries from them. We've met with them, consulted with them, and they thought that it would be appropriate to apply a license fee to the professional dog walkers out there, and also wrap around that fee some education by animal control team and a license, if you like, that they'd have to go through to competently and safely walk the number of dogs that have been seen in some of our parks and reserves across the city.
You know, I didn't have a question about that. My question really was about the policy, the public policy underlying the dog euthanization. Like, have we talked to the, like, is it actually, are these people actually going to give the money, and is there any impact that it might have on kind of the decisions that are made or the likely appeals? And is it just dangerous dogs, and do other councils do this? Like, it just...
Look, I believe it's quite common. I'd have to get Helen Jones online to talk to you in detail about that, but it is quite a common service, if you like, that the registered animal control officers provide through the pound facility, and it often can be you know, dogs who have been injured, dogs who have had no owner for some time, have been collected in the pound. There's a whole array of situations in which euthanasia would be applied to dog control. So as I say, there's 25 a year, and we were just trying to recover costs of that service.
It just says dangerous dogs in the papers, not any other circumstance.
Yeah, that's again, Helen can provide some details, but I understand it's a slightly broader array than just dangerous dogs.
All right, we'll move on to Councillor Condie.
Thanks. I was just, it looks like Siobhan's been reset up. I don't know if she wanted to answer the question about the earthquake strengthening.
I can see her. Thank you, Councillor Condie. Siobhan, we can see you. Can we hear you?
Councillors, can you hear me now? Yep, excellent. All right, sorry about that, technical difficulties. Councillor Fitzsimons, would you mind repeating your question? I think I got the end of it.
I hope I don't sound more stroppy as it goes on. I don't mean to, but this is the third time I've said it. So it's all good. Basically, my question really is the in the LTP, we took out the exact same amount that officers are now proposing we put back in for earthquake-prone buildings. So that was just last year. And we asked sensibly for some work to be done on additional support to owners of earthquake-prone buildings. And I guess I wasn't necessarily expecting that to have a financial price tag associated with it, but I appreciate, you know, your proposal is that it does. I guess I'm keen to understand the policy, public policy underlying the suggestion around 50% refund on resource consent fees, 50% refund on road use charges, fee waived, whether they're actually linked to the policy outcome that we want to see in this area, and what other factors were considered, particularly those that don't have a financial cost to all ratepayers?
Yes, so we were asked specifically about what relief we could provide, and as you'll appreciate, that was in the December meeting, so we've worked under some pressure to come up with some options. I think we signalled at the December meeting that they would be fairly low cost in their own, individually. And that's what we've presented for your consideration. In terms of how, in terms of our policy position on this, we are the regulator in this instance, as well as also trying to provide that relief to building owners. And there was a strong desire from Councillor Pannett, I think, to provide some options around that, and that's what we've done in this paper.
I guess I'm just, because the resolution's helpfully in the papers, and it doesn't say they have to be with a financial cost. So that's why I'm wondering if officers looked into things that don't cost, and whether you actually think there's a direct link between halving these fees and the policy outcome we want to see.
Potentially not in this case. So as I said, we are the scope of our review was quite narrow and took into account the time constraints that we're under.
Okay, Councillor Condi.
Thank you. I've got a few questions that relate to the table that is set out on pages 13 and 14 about revenue pressures. For the first one, I just would like to get some more understanding about the basis for the $1.5 million estimate of parking revenue loss related to the Let's Get Wellington Moving Golden Mile and the two transitional cycleways. Just given that we've seen zero revenue impact so far from the changes that we've made along Thorndon Quay, because what we've seen is, in fact, yes, occupancy has gone up, but we're seeing the same number of cars parking, and we're collecting the same amount of revenue across fewer car parks. How we got to these estimates and whether they're overly conservative, and I guess just an explanation of any further work that will happen prior to the 8th of March and final decisions being made there.
Thanks, Councillor Condi, if I can answer that one, and Kevin will be able to help with some of the detail. As we explained, that the Thorndon Quay example, where there hasn't been any lost revenue from prior to the change to post change, is because there was quite a lot of occupancy there or vacancy there from an occupancy level prior. What we have estimated the other two cycleways and the Let's Get Welly Moving parking loss revenue based on the number of parks coming out. We are going to undertake a review of some modelling on where those people who may previously have parked in those spaces may be able to use an alternative, and if that's actually council parking, because as we get closer to the city centre, there are a number of privately held parking buildings. So we need to review the likely I suppose transfer of those that revenue into other available council spaces and potentially into private parking buildings. And we are hoping to come back post consultation with more information on that.
Thanks, Deirdre. And then I just had a question about, there was a line item there about revenue pressures due to static cameras. And can we just get a reminder of the explanation there about what's the pressure there on revenue?
Yeah, hi councillors, I'm Kevin Black here. I'll just talk to that. So when we originally put that projection in, we have subsequently started some rollout of static cameras, and our experience to date with static camera technology in the city, and particularly, and I'm referring to the static cameras that are in place in Courtney Place, is that driver behaviour changed dramatically very quickly. So where we would have expected that to happen over a much longer time period, it happened quite quickly, and so therefore the amount of infringements that we have been issuing from those cameras is significantly less than we initially projected that we would. We are therefore now taking that experience and applying it to future cameras that will go live, and think that the change and the behaviour change will happen a lot quicker than we might otherwise have expected it to.
Thank you, but you can confirm that the rollout of those cameras is all going apace or at as agreed? We're not falling behind on that?
rollout of the static cameras at the moment. We're working with our provider to get those cameras progressively rolled out across the city in selected areas. Obviously, we can't put them everywhere all at the same time. We're also talking to the Transitional Cycleway Project team around potentially using cameras to help enforce those transitional cycleways as they start to roll out.
Thanks, Kevin. Then I would just wonder if we could get a detailed explanation for line item H, which just says pressure on achieving forecasted inflated revenue. What revenue is this, and what's the barrier that's in place to achieving the revenue increases we had forecast?
Deirdre, can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And my colleagues Richard and Rana might be able to jump in as well. But there is, you'll remember, councillors, that for every year of the annual plan, or for the long-term plan, we apply an inflation rate, and that's underlying in the significant forecasting assumptions of the long-term plan. So that assumes that every dollar of revenue is inflated the following year. Where that gets a little bit difficult is we would then have to increase every single fee every year. And you'll note from the fee increases that we're not doing that as a blanket increase. So that then has to be mitigated by an increase in volume. And where in most cases we are able to, either we've requested a fee increase or we are assuming we will have volume to cover that inflation rate, there are some areas that won't be possible. So there's always a pressure on to achieve that inflated revenue as we go through the long-term plan.
Is that something we might need to look at in future so that we don't overestimate if it's something we constantly come up against, is it something we need to look at in future so we don't over forecast the inflated revenue?
Yes, and we have previously talked about whether we do a blanket inflationary increase across every fee, but we just need to be careful of costs associated with fee increases, like changes in technology to increase, to actually physically increase the fees, changes in signage and things. So we have tended to do them in maybe every second year change fees rather than every single year.
Thanks, Deirdre. And just finally, do we have any more information about the possibility of reopening the Frank Kitts Park parking building for all-day parking?
I think Kevin will be able to answer that one.
Actually, no, I'm not the best person to be able to answer that one.
Maybe Liam?
Yeah, Liam might be able to come back on that.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Are you there? Good. Yes, Councillor Condi, the advice we provided to Council in a quick catch-up last week was that we've got some engineering advice that the ground conditions potentially aren't as bad as we initially thought. The position that Council adopted late last year is the same, that the advice from officers is that the car park can't be open. We won't receive the final engineering report until the end of February. And so I hope at that stage we'll be able to email councillors with any further advice in that regard before the 8th of March meeting.
Thanks, Liam. And thanks, that's all my questions.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Foon, you're up next.
Kia ora. Mine is regarding the waste fees. I have emailed Siobhan on this earlier today, but just to understand, do these fees take into account the levy increases that the government had said were going to happen? There seems like quite a big jump, but I didn't want to assume, and just clarify that as I couldn't see it mentioned in the paper.
Hi, Councillor Foon. I've got Rob here to
Hi,
answer
Rob.
that.
Hi, Councillor Foon. To answer your question, yes, it includes the waste minimization levy, full recovery, and as a little portion of ETS as well, and the carbon liability that we have to pay.
Great, thank you very much. And just one more question regarding fees and the conversation around waste flight. Is that something we've been able to have a look into to understand if that's actually happening? Are we seeing waste flight from Wellington because of increase in fees?
In general, we're not seeing it now. All we know anecdotally is one company is moving waste away from Wellington, but that is because their depot is located close to, in between the Southern Landfill and Pūroro City Council Spices Landfill. So they have the ability to move their waste over to Spices.
Spicer. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Councillor Pannett.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Matthews. Appreciate that. Siobhan, I'd just like to really thank you for dealing with that earthquake-prone building issue. I'm very grateful for that. My question was around the Environmental and Accessible Building Fund. Sorry, is that Liam or you, Siobhan?
That's Liam.
Oh, okay, Liam, are you there?
I am, yes.
Cool. So I see that a paper's coming. So again, really excited about this. Was just wondering, will the paper have advice about how effective the remission has been, and whether it's possible to have the remission as well as the fund?
We'll certainly be able to provide you advice about the track record on the fund being utilised to date. I'm not clear on the recommendation regarding whether we'll have both or not. That, of course, is always an option for council. But as far as the officer's recommendation is, I haven't actually seen the report yet, so I can't advise, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, just in terms, it would be just helpful if we could have that as an option, then we can decide whether it's a good one or not, just because I think we need as many tools in the toolbox as possible. And I've just got a question about leaky buildings too. I'm not sure who's supposed to answer that one, about whether there's been any change in the liability since we've had a briefing on it. Not sure which Beth deals with that now. Is that you or Stephen?
Yeah, it's actually under our legal team. Look, I'm not exactly 100% sure on the answer to that. I don't believe there has been, but I can get Beth to take that up with you offline.
That would be much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Councillor Day.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. My question is about mana whenua and how we are resourcing mana whenua. It comes up in the next paper, and Councillor Foon has agreed to include some wording to explain what we're doing. But I'm just feeling that as a governor, it's really hard to understand and see, particularly in our annual plan process, if we're adequately resourcing mana whenua to be able to participate and work with us as partners. Partly this is because a lot of our kaupapa, our projects are worked on in an individual way. And it means that often the feedback we get is that there's not enough resource for mana whenua to be able to tap into on their end. And I think, if there was a more cohesive approach, then it would be easier for them to be able to say, okay, we've got enough work here with this council to maybe employ someone to be able to do that mahi. And even at a regional level, the various councils are often doing similar sorts of things, and they could go, well, actually, we could employ 4 people to be able to do this, so that we don't get that response back, which is that we don't have the resourcing. I'm just wondering if we're looking at how we could articulate that in a way that I guess gives us as governors some sense of confidence in that direction, and also for the community, because often the community is saying to us, we want to understand how you are partnering and what you're doing. I'm aware that the 10-year Māori strategy has been worked on, so it may be something which I imagine is being discussed right now, but I'd be really keen to understand how we can communicate this through an annual plan process.
Karipa, are you available on this call? That sounds quiet. So Councillor Day, my understanding in my discussions with Karipa about the work being done on the 10-year Māori strategy is that it will articulate these kinds of ways of working, and also our upcoming MOU, which I think is scheduled for the next round of meetings. Unfortunately, Karipa would probably be able to enlarge on that, but I don't think he's currently in this meeting. We're happy to follow up, because we recognise the importance of this to this council.
Can I assist with that?
Yes, you certainly can, Mayor.
The timing that Karipa has given me is we do the Māori strategy in March, and then we do the signing of it was going to be called a strategic relationship agreement, and that'll be in April.
Yes. Siobhan, were you going to add something?
Yes, just because I've been talking to Karipa about this because it came up in Councillor Day's amendment for the waste paper. So I do believe the latest, Mayor Foster, is that we'll bring everything in April on both the MOU and the strategy. We will be working to make sure that, that there is an engagement framework in the strategy, but we'll also make sure that it's our capital plan and our projects are quite clearly articulated so that we know when we need engagement and from who. But specifically, so it gives Mana Whenua a heads up in terms of when we would expect that engagement from them.
So I guess just the question for this is how we articulate that through an annual plan process, and that might be something you need to go and have a bit of thinking about. But as governors, we want to know that we are giving appropriate resourcing to make this successful. And I know that the conversations are quite in depth and it will be a moving thing, but yeah, just what we can do to be supporting at a governance level would be helpful. Thank you.
So through you, Chair, we can provide some additional information in our next report to this committee in March on that.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, and I've got a few questions. So if I've had enough, just please let me know, and I'll come back for another round. But my one of the comments is on page 13, and cost pressures, and understandably labour costs are increasing, and also looking in the context of a growing programme of work, and just wondering, there doesn't seem to be anything in this document or in this and the recommendations to cut back on that program of work. Is that right? So we're just still carrying on with a growing program of work?
Well, through you, Chair, that is currently the instruction we have from our council. This is year 2 of your long-term plan, and we are implementing the program of work that you determined at that time. So that is a question really for the council. Okay, but at this time, the assumption is the approved levels of service as allowed for in the long-term plan, and the program of capital works as allowed for in the long-term plan, and as phased in terms of your recent decision over a 3-year period.
Thank you. And just going down to parking revenue, and in the loss of spaces, and specifically calling out Newtown and Thorndon, is that in additional to the current spaces already taken from Thorndon? Is this based on a proposal to remove even more?
I can answer that. So, no, where it says Thorndon, it's referring to the Thorndon cycleway. So, which is the botanical gardens down to the waterfront. The parking that has so far come out of Thorndon Quay is that this 1.5 million doesn't refer to any additional parking coming from Thorndon Quay, is my understanding.
Okay, and does it refer to any? I can't see any reduction in losing parking on the Golden Mile. Is that correct, or is that already built in?
That is included in the Let's Get Welly Moving, so that in the 1.5, that does include the impacts of Let's Get Welly Moving on the Golden Mile.
Okay, so number F also includes the Golden Mile. Okay, and just in terms of on the next page, page 14, and the waterfront parking, where we went from all-day parking to parking 240 minutes. Where we've lost 7 million or 0.7 million, 0.7 of $1 million. Is there any consideration being given to restore all-day parking to recoup some of that lost revenue?
Our understanding, so our reasoning for doing that in the first place was to provide additional capacity for short-term parking as short-term parking availability on the street becomes less available in the city on the other side. So we of course have been hit by COVID in terms of so our occupancy on those car parking area has reduced a little bit, but we suspect that's a lot to do with the fact of the ongoing COVID situation, and the fact that a number of people are working from home a lot of the time and not coming into the city as much as before. We are looking to promote both that parking area and Clifton Terrace going forward, to see if we can to lift the occupancy in there, and then maybe come around and have a look at that point.
And have you factored in, I know we're not collecting the late night parking fees, the Friday, Saturday night, because we don't have resources to do that. Is this factored in, that loss of revenue, into this next year's budget, or are you expecting to be able to collect that revenue?
Currently, that is still sitting in the budget.
Okay, so it's still in the budget, but it could well come out. Is that a risk?
I'll let Deirdre perhaps answer that question, because I assume you mean from a rating perspective.
So we currently assume that we will implement that later parking, and the revenue associated with that is still in the underlying budget. If we were to change that decision, or if that wasn't implemented, that would have an impact of 736k of revenue, is what's already in the underlying revenue budget in what you're looking at today.
For next year. Yeah, it would be quite good to see how much we've been able to recover of that already, or this current financial year, because how doable is it? Look, I've got one more question, but I see Mayor Foster's also wants questions. So, Chair, do you want me to drop back out again?
Get your last one out, Diane.
Look, and it's about the amendment that's coming through, in that there's a proposal that we won't increase the rates any more than what that we've got in the proposal. Well, what happens if are officers confident that that can be achieved, especially if indications that I got late last year was that whilst the average rates increase was 9%, actually, because of the differentials in the valuations, that could well be 12.5% for residential and about 4% for commercial. So I'm just trying to understand is how, if we said we were going to keep it at 12% for residential, 12.5% for residential, does that open up an opportunity to add even more money into the budget?
Through you, Chair, I think we need to be careful not to confuse the overall necessary rates requirement to support a budget for the year and the way in which the rates are then allocated under the Rating Act and a different policy. So that's quite a complex question. So I think the key is to focus on the overall rates increase, which at the moment is drafted to be 9.1%, and the way that a rates increase is then allocated as a result of the new valuations is a different matter and is quite a complex question.
But I suppose it's the ratepayers are quite interested, and I'm sure the commercial would be keen to understand what it means for them, and residential ratepayers knowing what it means for them, because 12% is a lot higher than 9%.
Indeed, and of course it will vary ultimately property to property depending on valuations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Calvert. Mayor Foster.
Thank you. Look, about 5 or 6 questions, I think. The first one of them is, are there any elements in the budget as it is at the moment that you would think, and I'm particularly thinking of anything that's COVID related, but there could be others which you think are worth contemplating, whether they could be spread over time rather than just hitting the budget in this year?
Through you, Chair. Mayor, can you clarify, are you referring to capital works?
No, potentially OPEX costs. I mean, it's the same kind of thing that we did with some costs last year. In fact, some of we borrowed the previous time, but it's the approach that we took in response to the suggestions last year that were made around the LTP.
because in terms of the first lockdown and the annual plan at that time 2 years ago, yes, we did reduce the impact of rates in that year through borrowing to subsidise the operating cost, but obviously those costs then accrue in the subsequent years, and we are still dealing with some of those costs in the current year. So I would certainly advise the council against doing anything like that in the current environment.
Through you, Chair, the other point to make is that the impacts of COVID, we're maintaining a watching brief and treating it as a risk right now, perhaps to be revisited when you adopt or deliberate. And as we know, our CCOs, particularly that are relying on visitation, are probably likely to experience some revenue reduction. So, it's a bit of an unknown at the moment, and that could be an area there that we might well adopt that approach that you're proposing.
Okay, no, thank you. The second one is in the parking area, going back to the one that Diane asked about on F. So two questions in relation to that. One is that does that 1.5 million represent a part year or full year expectation of loss of revenue? And the reason I'm asking that is because a lot of, particularly Golden Mile and Thornton are not expected to have physical work start happening until right at the tail end of the year, and obviously take some time to deliver. So hence the question there.
My understanding. Oh, go on, Deirdre.
My understanding is that is relating to when we're expecting for that revenue to decrease, but we can confirm that and come back to you.
So does that mean that let's make it simple, that if those are expected to be lost, those spaces are expected to be lost, say let's say 31 December to make it nice and easy, that in a full year it would actually be a $3 million loss?
There are a number of factors included in that 1.5, so I would need to check the detail on it. Okay. But yes, in theory.
Okay, and the second part of that question in relation to that particular bit is the loss of parking revenue has always been one of the things that we anticipated being part of our contribution to Let's Get Wellington Moving, and we're still sort of working our way through all the funding arrangements. So is that not in some ways able to be partly offset against the costs that we have budgeted for?
So we have budgeted for the costs of the Let's Get Wellington Moving project, but we need to reflect, and that is part of that will be the lost parking revenue and our portion of that, but we also need to reflect the actual loss of revenue from our P&L through this process. And as you remember from a number of discussions last year, that has a direct impact on our debt to income ratio and the amount of revenue that we are generating to facilitate that. So from a prudent point of view, we have to be able to represent accurately what revenue we expect to get.
So let's say it was 1.5 million and let's say we're borrowing at 3%, that's the equivalent of $50 million in capex, isn't it? That 1.5.
Yes.
So how do we account for that in terms of saying, well, actually now we no longer need to, because we budgeted 220. So if we took those out and we said, well, actually now the capital budget over, some of it will be this year, some will be following years, most of it will be following years, but it's now only 170.
Sorry, Mayor Foster, I'll need you to say that to me again.
So because the loss of parking is part of our contribution, and we basically said, well, look, we've budgeted 220 million. If this 1.5 and in a full year it would actually be worse, it'd be 100 million. But that's the equivalent of about $50 million in capex. So does that reduce the capital budget over the period of the LTP by effectively $50 million in this year alone?
So it doesn't reduce the capital budget. Our capital budget is set as per the LTP and the rescheduling that was approved by council. So we're not expecting any impact on our capital budget. Yes, it may impact on our debt to income ratio, but we with all of the movements that we are talking about today and all of the movements that might come through any decisions that you make, I couldn't give an answer on exactly the impact of that to the overall debt to income ratio right now.
No, it was more about the capital program going on. So it's the arrangement we've got with Let's Get Wellington Moving Partners. Okay, and look, the other questions I've got, we've got in the $421 million in capex. Is that our entire program if we did everything that was in the program? And is that what we have budgeted well, in fact, it'll be true for the year which we're in at the moment. Are we effectively budgeting on the basis that we'd actually done everything or delivered everything?
Yes, we are. That is based on the rephased capital program that you agreed. We are assuming that we will deliver the capital program that we've come to you with when we rephased it, and then the rephased for next financial year, including the carry forwards that we carry forward into that year.
I think I'm going to need to spend a little bit more time with you on that one to try and get my head around what that means. And two final ones. There's some new fees there. I'm really going down to a small one here, but new fees for the use of the Troop Picnic Garden and the Discovery Gardens and things like that. Why have we decided we want to start charging for those? Does this mean if somebody occupies the entire space? So on page 19.
Through you, Chair, I'm wondering whether that's a question we can come back to you on.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah.
Cool. And the final question I had is just you've given us the cost of the revenue against the late night parking. What you haven't given us the cost of collection. Do you have any idea what that will be? In other words, cost of enforcement, etc. And the legal costs, etc.
Kevin may be able to give some detail, but ultimately the expected costs of that is included in the budget. I don't have that detail in front of me, but we can provide it.
Yeah, okay. It'd be good to have the gross numbers because we indicated we were going to take that out. So
we can follow up with that.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Condi, you have another question?
Thank you. Sorry, two more. Can I start with Siobhan? This is just a follow-up question about the earthquake-prone buildings and the proposed discounts on some of the fees related to that. And am I correct in reading this that any specific individual project would receive a discount of $15,000 as a maximum?
Yeah, if they applied for that, yeah.
Okay, so any one project, the most that they could get is $15,000.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. That was easy. And then I had a question for Liam about the building control and facilitation fees. There's a table on page 38, 39, where it's talking about, right at the bottom, it says less than $10,000. And some of these fees are going up by almost double. And I have no memory of why those fees might be increasing so much. Can you remind me?
Yes, so the last LTP decision, we across the board increased the building consent fees by 28%. There were some unders and overs above that, but on average it was a 28% increase. Is there any particular fee you want some advice on?
No, I was just looking at that whole list all the way down. Was so this is just a continuation of the agreed fee increases that we had across.
Look, it is. There's a couple of additions based on some of learnt experiences. I think you'll just draw your attention to that certificate. Yeah, so that's actually where a lot of the illegal, if not illegal, but certainly uncertified building works occur, and they come back to council to get those certified. So we're trying to increase that fee by doubling it to act as a disincentive, because what we're finding from experience is that people are kind of doing things and asking for forgiveness later, and it's creating a situation where it's a workaround for a building consent. So what we've tried to do is disincentivize that behaviour and increase that fee by double. So that may be the one you're referring to.
Thanks, Liam.
Hey, Foster, you've still got your hand up. Have you got any more questions? No. Councillor Young.
Sorry. So just going back to Jenny's question about page 39, I mean, nearly all of those, if not all of them, are at least doubled. That's not 28%. I mean, you know, 4,000 to 8,000, 5,000 to 11,000, 6,000 to 12,000, 6,000 to 13,000.
Just bear with me, Councillor. I'm just getting to that page.
That's page 39.
Yep.
I'm just conscious that we're trying to get buildings built, houses built. This doesn't seem to be the right way to approach it. You see, and I get smiles from all my left-wing colleagues.
See, a new Yimby just dropped, Councillor Young.
Yeah, so I think in totality, yes, it's a fee increase. I think these relate to the value of the buildings when they're lodged for building and resource consent, and so the increase in fees relates to I think the percentage increase in the value. So without having the planning manager or the building manager online, I'm just looking for their inclusion. I'd have to take that question on notice, but I think you'll find that those fees are in line with both a review in the LTP of our similar peer councils in terms of what they were charging in an incremental way for the value of the build, both across building and planning, but more broadly equating to a 28% fee increase.
That sounds like, dare I say it, that sounds like municipal gobbledygook. It is completely incomprehensible. I don't believe it. We have a column which says basically they're all being doubled, and we are trying to get houses built, and we are trying to make the city vibrant. Could I have a really full answer, please?
I will. Yeah,
I'm just.
That's all right. No, I'm just getting the planning manager online now, so he'll be with you shortly.
Thank you.
Have you got another question, Mayor Foster, while we wait for that? Off you go.
Yeah, look, just given the question and the increases are very large, I'd be interested in if you can tell us what level of cost recovery we actually make, in other words, what the subsidy level is for building consents just to deliver them. And the second bit of that is what it is that we're paying out when things go wrong as a proportion. And my recollection was we were under recovering, and then of course that we were under recovering the cost of actually doing the inspections, and then we weren't recovering a thing in relation to when things go wrong, which is a horrendous cost. But I'd be interested in seeing the numbers.
Okay, let's see if we can get a fuller answer now, and if not, perhaps we could get a comprehensive answer to Councillor Young and Mayor Foster's questions via email. But let's see.
Yeah.
Have we got someone there, or should we?
I've heard the question. We're just trying to get the planning manager online now, so we'll come back with a more fulsome response in an email. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay. In that case, we don't seem to have any more questions at present. And so I just want to check in with people. Would you like a short break now, or shall we keep going and move the paper? So, Councillor Foon, let's have 5 minutes and come back at 2:35. Is that okay? All right, then we'll push on. Thank you. All right, councillors, could you put your video back when you're back with us? Just wait another 30 seconds. Are you there, Mayor Foster? All right, perhaps not, but I think we've probably got enough people to come back and start live streaming and reconvene the meeting. Oh, there you are. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. So just Mayor Foster, are you happy to second the paper?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
I know you said you were going to make one amendment to it, which is the one I've asked us to have a look at.
Yes.
Seeing if we can find some ways to make some progress.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
so-
are you ready? Sorry, just for clarification on Councillor Young's question before.
Yes, have you got someone there who can answer that now, Liam?
Yeah, I do. I want to decipher the gobbledygook, but I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong table, Councillor Young. But I mean, the comment I made, and I think Seth Campbell's just jumping online now. But this relates to my earlier comment to Councillor Condie on the 50% fee increase. Whilst across the board, we've gone up 28%. These fees relate to a particular situation where the builder conducts the works and then asks for forgiveness, and that's that doubling of fee. So it's quite a small element to the broader cost of development in the city, if you like. Just mentioning your concern around, we're trying to get development happening in the city. This is quite a small non-complying element of our community. He goes and does the building works, and as I said before, answering Councillor Condie's question, this is a disincentive to try to get that not happening. And Seth, is Seth there? If any other questions? Yeah. How was that explanation, Seth? Okay.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions related to that?
Sorry, Seth, you're on mute.
Oh, welcome, Seth.
You were going to try and answer the overall cost recovery question from building consents. But if you can't do that now, that's fine. You can do it later on.
I can probably answer the Mayor's question just with regards to the Troop Picnic Lawn fee, the new fee there. So we currently charge a similar fee for the Sound Shell, the Dell and the Cocaine Lawn at Otari. So it's just, it is actually for groups that are greater than 20, and it just enables us to ensure the space is ready for them when we put some signage down there. So it's really just our ability to be consistent with how we charge for these spaces. There's public barbecues there and toilets as well as part of that booking.
So it's an exclusive use arrangement for at least a part of the area.
Yes, correct. Yeah, for groups greater than 20. Yep.
Okay, well, I am conscious of time, so I think we'll move on to debate the paper now, and we can get, as I say, any unanswered questions completed through email. So I would like to move the paper, and just really only to speak very briefly to note that there is an amendment to the substantive, basically that, and this is the discussion that the Mayor initiated this morning, that we're going to identify, officers will be identifying options in conjunction with the Mayor and myself. And of course, we will be talking that over with council colleagues to see if we can reduce the proposed rates increase. And that will be reported back at our meeting of 8th of March, noting the savings already made and built into the draft budget. So I just want to thank officers for their work. This is obviously a very difficult time under which to be making projections and budgeting, and that we're all sort of committed to the best possible process that we can to ensure, the best outcome for Wellington. So, Mayor Foster, would you like to make any comments as seconder?
Yeah, well, first of all, can I thank you, Chair, and can I thank all councillors and also all of the officers who've worked hard to put this together. I'm going to start off by saying I'm 9.1% before growth, and so let's say it's going to be somewhere between 8.1 and 8.6 after growth, depending on what the growth numbers are. That's obviously a reasonably high number in the context that we're in. That's both because of last year, but also because of COVID. But what it reflects is an investment in our city. And what was very, very clear, a resounding response from our community last year when we put the LTP out, was that people wanted us to invest in our city. In fact, you could say that if anything, the push was to go higher and do more in some areas of our budget. So that doesn't mean that we can just go and spend more willy-nilly, but it does mean that we do need to invest in our city. And let's be clear, this budget, what's this budget being driven by? It's basically being driven not by lots of new initiatives that we're taking to put in new OPEX spending. It's being driven by CapEx. It's being driven by CapEx over the last year, the year before, the year before that, the year before that. It's things which are already cemented into the budget. And funnily enough, when you build a house, you've got to pay for the interest costs on your mortgage. You've got to pay for the depreciation on that house. And that's exactly what is driving this budget. There are two other things which are also in there, which I think we're all aware of, is that the rate of inflation is markedly higher than most people predicted, certainly higher than the banking authorities and the economists predicted, and is running at close to 6% as of the end of December, which is not what we predicted. And also that's having an effect on costs. It's having an effect on labour costs. And also, we're all well aware that what's happening in the construction and shipping, etc., areas is putting huge amounts of pressure, not just on council, but on all sorts of organisations who are doing development. And it's interesting to note that many of the challenges that we face are actually being, and sometimes we're getting through them better than private sector, for example. In terms of both time and budget. So I think we should say our officers are doing a very, very fine job in keeping on managing those issues. But the key bit here is the budget is being driven by CapEx. And I'd like to remind you all that if you go back to the 2018 budget, 2018-28 LTP, that had effectively 4 years of 7% rates increases, of which this would have been year 3. And so that would have been 28% over those 4 years. Now, those budgets did not include an uplift in infrastructure investment, which we did in responding to pipes starting to break. And that's not something our community had been pushing us for years and years and years. But by crikey, they turned around and we turned around and said, we've got to do something about that. So we've got significant uplift in the hard infrastructure area. We took the same approach and said, look, we're actually recognising that we don't want to under renew in the hard infrastructure area. We said we needed to do the same thing in for example, our parks, buildings, etc. We didn't want to let them continue to depreciate. So we've increased the investment there. That is reflected in this as well. We also did not include the same level of funding for Let's Get Wellington Moving. I think it was $100 million then, it's now 220. And that just reflects the advancing of the project. And we hadn't included things, for example, like the library in terms of the cost. We're actually getting work underway there, and those sort of things are starting to flow through into our budgets. And of course, none of that, going back to 2018, contemplated a global pandemic. And that has had a material effect on our budgets, both in terms of revenue that's been lost, and that has sometimes we spread it over years, and sometimes we've taken it up front, but also in terms of costs. And there are costs, for example, to our venues. We know about those. There are costs in terms of things like extra security, etc. So it's had a material effect on our budgets. That's not a great place to be, but that is where we're at, and that is the response that we are needing to make. So I'm going to leave it there, other than say, if we can make some savings around the edges, then I'm keen to do that. I will be looking for volunteers to assist in that. In the usual way, people have got ideas. I'm certainly going to be looking for that, so that we can try and move forward together on this budget. Look, thanks again, everyone, for the work, and I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Foon, I believe you've got an amendment.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that great explanation, Mayor Foster. That was really useful to recap back to the last LTP as well. And just on the substantive, I do want to thank all of our officers for coming up with the huge savings, 15 million, I think it was, within the organisation, which is really fantastic. So thank you. So my amendment, I don't know if Officer Sean, you can put that up. Yes, great, thank you. So this amendment really is a request for more information. And these are things that I have been asking officers for a while. So it's just a signal that this could be something that would be coming to get officer advice, so that we might make a decision on March the 8th at our next annual plan meeting. But to just unpack them a little bit, I've just becoming very aware that many other councils in New Zealand are starting to transition away from the use of glyphosate or Roundup or herbicides that have really got this poison in them. Just examples of that are Auckland and Christchurch are both using steam techniques. And just recently, Marlborough started to move toward transition to an organic herbicide, which and they want to move away from the use of glyphosate by half by 2030. So really, this is just asking officers for more information on what that would look like for Wellington City Council. And the reason why we don't want to use glyphosate, if we can possibly help it, is that it's not working for our full and whole system. For example, it does get into our water system, into our groundwater and our streams. It is linked with cancer, but also that the users of our parks, our children, our animals and our players, just basically this is about how do we look to conserve our soil health for future generations. This also relates to our ecological emergency, so it's really just starting to get that regenerative balance, and that is what I'm asking for information on. Also, another request there is to understand if the Sanctuary to Sea project that Zealandia is working on, that we are partners with, including iwi and Greater Wellington Regional Council, I think there are about 15 other councils, but it's just understanding what they need, if they need anything from WCC to help progress this project. I'm not envisaging this to be a lot, but it's just understanding what can we help to propel that forward. And of course, this project relates back to the whai tour and actually Te Mana o Te Wai and how we are treating our fresh water and our awa. And I understand that iwi have prioritised the Kaiwharawhara stream. Please correct me on that, but I understand that that is where they've chosen to put their priority. And so this would help us to move forward and tell a good story for Wellington. Councillor O'Neill is going to second it, and she will take the third recommendation or motion to, sorry, not getting the words out today. So I'll hand it over to Councillor O'Neill to talk about item 3.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I'm happy to reserve my right to speak at the moment.
Do we have any other speakers on this amendment? You might just be on, Terry. Oh no, Councillor Young.
So my face keeps bouncing around. Okay, so the one thing I would say is, I don't know if anyone's been to see the Rose Garden in the Botanic Gardens recently, but I've had a number of people saying it looks terrible. And apparently it's because we are trying to use some of the more environmentally friendly pesticides, what do you call those things? And the Rose Garden, which should be at its peak or in the past couple of months, looks like it's been blitzed by something very unfriendly. So I wonder whether this is just something which makes us feel good, but actually isn't very effective, because these more environmentally friendly weed killers, etc., aren't very good. And that's something which also came up again at the meeting last week that Councillor Pannett and I attended in Mount Cook at the Carrington Street Zigzag, where they just said Councillor Pannett asked if we would use more environmentally friendly weed killers and that sort of thing, and the answer was they're just not effective. So I wonder whether this is just something which makes us feel good, but actually we're not going to do the job of killing those little brutes. I'm talking about plants, not dogs, for those of you who are interested.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Condi.
Thanks, Councillor Foon, for bringing this. I'm not going to be supporting it today because I think my reasons are twofold. One is that the fact that we're at 9.1% rates already, I'm not really looking to add more things on, no matter how good those things might be. But also, I hear what you're saying about simply asking for more information, but I'm also really conscious of the pressure staff are under over the next month with goodness knows what's going to happen with Omicron. So it's something that I probably won't support if it comes back in the 8th of March, and therefore I don't really want to send staff away to do work that I probably won't vote for when it comes up. So that's really where I've landed. Thank you.
Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar to Councillor Condi, as I seem to be doing a lot these days. I guess the roundup narrative seems to have overtaken, the science and facts. I guess we've been using it for decades, and as far as I can tell, it's been pretty good. But without doubt, there are some drawbacks, and there could be some improvements. But I'm not convinced that it's the end of the world to use it. It's used widely throughout. I, like Councillor Condi, probably won't support it if it comes back, and I think that the officers have got plenty to do, but understand where you're coming from, Councillor Foon.
Councillor Day.
Kia ora koutou. I will be supporting this. I think it's important that we don't put costs in front of the environment, particularly in situations like this. Science is clear that we don't want things like this in our waterways, and we do need to start to address this and make sure that we're actually caring for the whole environment. And if the roses don't cope with natural sprays and pesticides, maybe they're not meant to be here. And there is a bit of a kōrero that needs to happen around that, around what can survive. And we're in Aotearoa, and there are plenty of plants that do survive here without needing those sprays. So I think we're going to have to be bold and make sure that we're going forward in a way that cares for the whole environment. So happy to support.
Mayor Foster.
Can I ask a question of officers, given that we haven't actually had this one before? You're on
yes,
mute.
You can.
Yeah, thank you. I just like officer advice.
Yes.
I just like officer advice on these, and that's whether you support them, what you know, because I know we've had the discussion before about the pesticide use on a number of occasions, that one in particular, but your advice on those issues, but also your advice on your capacity to do the work, given the comments that have been made by some of the councillors speaking.
I'm happy to give some high-level comment on all three. Of the transition from use of pesticides initially. Look, I think it goes without saying we always need to be looking at reducing our use and reliance on pesticides. And technology does continue to evolve. As Mayor Foster has said, this council has debated this. Probably last time they did that was some 15 years ago, where at the time we moved away from a steam technology to back to the use of agrochemicals for a lot of our weed control, particularly in the road corridor. And actually, when we delved into that at the time, it was actually the high consumption of water and diesel to heat the steam at the time. So whatever method of control you look at, you just need to consider what is the full cost and the impact on the environment. And I suppose these days, which wasn't such a factor at the time, but the carbon footprint. And again, if you look at the cost of fuel at the moment, that again is a significant cost driver, a lot of the work that we do. The effectiveness of different products and I suppose impact on assets is another consideration. So we use, agrochemicals for a wide range of uses, but we are very mindful of limiting and continuing to look at alternatives. So happy to give you some advice. At the time we transitioned back, as well as, I suppose, what could be argued was less impact on the environment, there were significant cost savings at the time. So there's likely to be increased costs, would be my high-level feedback if you went back to the use on the road corridor particularly. I think the other option that you may need to consider, and there's a bit of a trade-off around the impact on assets, is are the community prepared to accept a different level of service in terms of weed control? So look, happy to work with Brad and the infrastructure team around giving you some advice, but I think in the time frame available, it could probably be reasonably high level. But we can see what we can gather from other councils as well. The Sanctuary to Sea project, I think that the issue there is probably how we would fund that. It's probably most sensibly funded out of the environmental grant pool funding. And what I understand is that you probably, to fund that successfully and not compromise other groups that have funding out of that pool, you may need, the sensible thing might be to increase that grant funding pool as being a way of supporting that very worthy project. So we can give you some advice around that. The last one, the target around tree planting, happy to give you some high level numbers around that. Again, it's our ability to produce those plants and plant and maintain them. I actually think there's probably an option where if we put a little bit more resource into the aftercare and maintenance of the plants that we do now and get a greater success rate and better survivability, that might be a better investment rather than planting more. So happy to give you a couple of options there for you to consider.
So Paul, you're happy to do the work, I guess, is the point you're making.
Yeah, look, I've already given Brad a heads up around the agrochemical question or using alternatives. So I'm happy to come back to you on that at a high level. The other two points that are raised there, we can certainly give you some advice on options. But I think as you've been discussing, these all potentially have a rates impact at some point, and you need to decide what your priority is. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. So can I speak, Madam Chair?
Yeah, actually, I've just got, Councillor O'Neill's got a question of officers as well, so we'll go straight to that. And if anybody else has got a question, let me know.
Cool, kia ora. Thank you, Paul. My partai was just around really firming up that your team is comfortable to be able to provide that advice before the 8th of March. Just getting it clear.
Yeah, I believe so. I think we can provide that advice. The level of detail around the transitioning from an agrochemical to an alternative may need a little bit more time, but the other two requests, I think we can do that reasonably comfortably. Because I suppose ultimately you'd like to see a full business case around that. Particularly that first one, because there are, I suppose, other considerations and could certainly be increased costs that previously were quite significant.
Cheers. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, we'll go to Mayor Foster's contribution to the amendment.
Yeah, look, I'm going to say thanks, Councillors Foon and O'Neill, for bringing the amendment. These are things which, well, by and large, I'd say I support those things, but I am, and I'm happy on the basis that officers are happy to provide us some advice and that they don't see it as being too onerous to support investigating. However, I take the same point that Councillor Condie and Rush made, that I'm not looking to see things added, costs added, as opposed to things which we might not be collecting. But I'm not happy to see costs added to our budget as it is at the moment, and it might be something that maybe gets tackled later on.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to speak now. Look, I just wanted to briefly touch on Part C of the amendment, which is around 2 million trees, and use this opportunity to talk about the amount of work that our officers and volunteer groups have done over the last 2 decades to reach that number of 2 million plants. So we've got 170 different volunteer conservation groups that worked really tirelessly on reaching toward that goal. And I guess when I read my papers, when I read the, pulling out the Town Belt Management Plan and other great values, and just addressing other councillors' questions around the strategy and the prioritisation, I think we can all agree that in the past, Wellington City Council, and hopefully today, has an ambition to create a fantastic, rich urban forest. And we can do that by, supporting initiatives to look into making sure that we are well prepared for the future. just touching on why I'm happy to really support Councillor Foon in this amendment today is I'm a big firm believer that we should be the best informed when we are coming to the table and we're pulling budget lines out of here, there and everywhere. And I know that last year we had the situation, Councillor Young, I'm glad you brought it up, but the Rose Garden and Begonia House in Otari Wilton for a time got their budget reprioritised and mixed up in a few other things. So I guess just understanding the implications for our PSR team, for our partners in City to Sea and our iwi partners, and we've got the Māori Biodiversity Collective, Zealandia, a whole range of people really interested in this. So that's why I'm really, kind of calling to make sure that we make the most informed decision. Because I also know that we can all share around this table the kind of fiscal responsibility constraints of a pending rates rise. So I want to be as informed, and that will hopefully mean that on March 8th, we will not be making any rash decisions around our environmental budgets.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Paul, have you taken your hand down?
No, I thought the debate was sufficient, so I'll just leave it.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. All right, Councillor Foon. Oh, sorry, Councillor Calvert, off you go.
Sorry, just having a bit of a technical thing. Look, very briefly, I'm going to support Councillor Conde's comments. I just think at this stage, we're looking at additional spending. We're not trying to protect the existing spending. And if we were looking at anything big, it would be around the housing, it would be around infrastructure. They're the key things that we've got to think about for the next 12 months. And I have a number of roses, and I don't spray them with those type of products, and they are looking fine. So maybe I can give some tips to the Botanical Garden. Anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. Councillor Foon, for your right of reply.
Yeah, kia ora, and thank you for the debate, everybody. I really appreciate it. But I think, this is what we are trying to do, as Councillor O'Neill has pointed out, is understand more about the situation. So we're asking for information just so that we are aware. So I would really appreciate your support. We are doing the right thing by not bringing it on March the 8th. We're bringing and asking for the information now. And I think it is fair that that is supported. Councillor Rush, I just want to let you know that 150 cities in the nation of the United States have now banned the use of glyphosate, and Germany is moving to ban it by 2024. And so, but what I'm hoping to see from this council is the way that we can start phasing it out. Like that is what we're asking for here. What does it look like? Where are the most obvious places to start? But yes, and I think it really is about the vision for what we want this capital to be like, that we've got holistic systems. That's why I'm here today for this last 2 years and maybe just another few months more. But to me, everything we're going for the city is about the capital spaces conversation we had early this morning. So thank you, everybody. Look forward to your support, just to ask officers for more information. Kia ora.
All right, if we could bring those amendments up. Do people want to take them separately? No, all together? Okay, great. Officer Johnson, thank you. All right, so we'll vote now on all of those.
That is carried. 9 votes in favour, 5 against. Councillors Calvert, Young, Condie, Rush and Wolf against.
Thank you. And I also just want to note, people may be aware that I've been looking at an amendment around library fines, and that policy work is quite well advanced, but unfortunately I only got notice this afternoon. So I will be circulating that amongst councillors very soon, and we will debate that on March the 8th, but we'll have plenty of time to consider that issue before that meeting. So we go back to debate on the substantive. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Day.
Kia ora koutou. Very briefly, I'd like to thank the staff for the work they've done to pull this together in a very strange time where we're trying to have a crystal ball, when even the crystal ball probably would struggle to show us what's going to happen in the next wee while. I just want to acknowledge and thank the CE for saying that we will receive some information for the next meeting around how we track our funding and resourcing for mana whenua to show, I guess, a more cohesive perspective on what we are providing, because it all sits in separate budget lines. It can be quite hard to see if we're sending a clear picture of how we are resourcing that and whether that is reasonable and helpful. So I think it'll be really good to have that advice, and thank you very much for agreeing to do that. Kia ora.
Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yeah, just briefly want to echo that thanks to officers for this work. And obviously this is the start of a process, but I did just want to flag that I did have a question around the charges for the Botanical Gardens, which is still not answered, and Mayor Foster also asked that question. So I'm hoping I can get some officer advice on that. Happy to support it to the next stage at this time. I also just wanted to highlight a concern I have with number 5, which I'm likely to vote against, and that's just putting back in $500,000 of operational expenditure that we took out in the LTP, and that's around earthquake-prone buildings. And I was happy to support more work being done to work out if there was a way that we could better support owners, but I want there to be a clear link between the support we provide and the outcomes for the city. And the officer advice that we got today was that there isn't a clear link. So I'm likely to vote against it, but I am open to even funding this work or sort of a different approach in this area, but as long as we know that there is a tangible outcome and that there are strong public policy grounds on which to do it. But at this stage, it's going to be difficult for me to support number 5 as it's currently outlined. I just wanted to be clear and upfront with that, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzsimons, getting very husky towards the end there. Councillor Condi.
Thank you. Again, I'll just echo the thanks of people who have thanked the staff. It's an enormous amount of work to get us to this stage in a really uncertain time. And also just want to call attention to the significant organisational savings that staff and management have found, not just for this year's budget, for the previous 2 years' budgets. The management have found, promised and delivered significant operational savings without making any real cuts to our level of service. And I think it's really extraordinary, and we need to be, as often as possible, drawing that to the attention of the public who want to know that we are being careful with their pennies. And I think this is a great example where we're finding operational efficiencies and process efficiencies to do that. So thank you again to those involved with all of that work. This is, again, I'm speaking to number 5, where I would like for this to be taken separately because I intend to vote against it. And simply for similar reasons to that I raised with Councillor Foon's amendment just now. I think when we're already at 9.1%, we're focusing on really the major infrastructure that needs to be sorted out in the middle of a global pandemic. I'm not interested in adding little bits and pieces here and there. I think we need to just hold the phone on some of those things. I see why building owners would welcome these fee discounts, because it could save them potentially $15,000 across their project. But I just don't think that with the size of projects that we're talking about, $15,000 is going to make the difference between a project going ahead or not going ahead. And so for me, it's really about how well do we understand the barriers to keeping these buildings from not being strengthened, and how can we make sure that if we do intervene with some ratepayer money, that it's going to make the most difference. I guess I had in mind whether we might need to provide more assistance around helping them working with engineers or QSs or project management, things that they might not otherwise have skills with. But I'd like to see a full suite of what do we think we can provide, and what do we think the actual barriers are here, before I would vote to support any additional funding. So this is again an area I would be happy to see more work done, but on the work that has been done to date, I'm not going to be supporting it. Thanks.
Councillor Pennant.
Sorry, thank you. And sorry, I've got some dogs. I'm just going to move briefly so that you don't have to listen to them. Look, I just want to say thank you to the officers as well. And they've done heaps of work on what is a very difficult circumstance. as a leftist, I am a little bit worried about the 9.1% rates increase. Like, we're all experiencing really high costs for even basics like food. So that is a worry. I'd just like to make two other comments, just to thank officers for doing the work on the Environmental and Accessible Building Fund. This is way overdue. It's critical that the work is done. So I'm very grateful and look forward to the paper on the 8th. And the last point I'd like to make is, look, Councillor Condi and Fitzsimons, I find your comments useful. I just want to give you some reassurance that the major policy objective we're trying to get here is to make sure our city is safe, and to also to give confidence to people who want to live in apartments that they will be able to continue to afford to live in those apartments. Because what's happening at the moment is that people are starting to be taken off the property ladder and going back into rentals because they cannot afford to strengthen their buildings. Now, the question is the best way to help them? While advice is extremely useful, the major problem is cold, hard cash. It's just too expensive to do the work. And you've got the survey work from Inner City Wellington, plus the survey work that the council did to show you that the minimum cost is around $300,000 or $400,000. The $400,000 cost from Inner City Wellington is 2019 figures. It will be more now. That is horrific. There is no way that most of us could afford that kind of money. And particularly as we age, that cost becomes even more difficult to sustain. It is not responsible for any of us to borrow that kind of money as we get to our 50s, 60s and 70s. There's no way to pay it back. The government has been negligent on this. It has not done enough to help owners after imposing the 2016 legislation and encouraging people to live in apartments through the MPS. So I would encourage you to support this. It is urgent to make sure that our city is safe and that people can live in apartment buildings, knowing that at least the council will help them do this critical work, because all buildings eventually need to be strengthened. It's not just the current ones. And then, because it is not fair that people who live in apartments should have such a high regulatory cost compared to people who live in standalone houses. So if this intensification drive is going to work, people need help, and the government also needs to come to the party. Kia ora.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And I wonder if the chair could just address the last, then write a reply, the last recommendation, which is about finding further savings, because one of the things is we can find savings, but what does that look like? Is that 0.1%? Is that, is that 3%? What are we looking at? Because I think that would be really helpful to how do we frame that? And also what might be some of the high level principles other than just cutting costs? Is it CapEx? Is it operational? What's the mix? So I think there needs to be certainly a framework around that. It's as much as I'd like to support number 5, again, I don't think I can, because I'm not sure whether it's going to produce the outcomes that we are really wanting. I think this is part of a bigger issue. We just haven't advocated enough as a city for ourselves with government on the impacts of the 2016 quake, on the impacts of the 2013 quake. And, we've got to take that on ourselves. We've got the same issue around social housing. We need to think about, those aspects. So I think there's certainly a strong advocacy aspect here, because it's not just about strengthening these buildings. We've lost a lot of assets, or our infrastructure's been damaged through those quakes. And unlike other parts of the country, when they suffer something like this, they certainly have been helped along by government, and we haven't had anything. So I hope that we are going to start looking at where we can find some, not necessarily operational savings, but cuts in operational expenditure, because I acknowledge that council officers have found $15 million, but we've got to be clear about what we're aiming for. And I think we've got to be upfront with ourselves and upfront with Wellingtonians about what this might look like. We talk about the average rates increase, and I'm a little bit concerned that we can't split that out between residential and commercial at this stage. We can tell people what the average is, but we can't break that down in the two main groups. So I do find that surprising. I do find that surprising, especially as we just recently had to deal with a $3 million miscalculation as well, resulting in not collecting enough water rates. So I really hope that we do have that information available, because we do need to be upfront, because what does that look like? And because that might mean that we may need to make some cuts in some areas to ensure that we get through the next 12 months. And by then, I suppose in the next month, we'll understand even more about the impacts of Omicron. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? No, well, very briefly, right of reply, seeing I was asked to comment on something.
Too late. Sorry. Trying to find buttons.
Mute yourself. Oh, are you too late? Do you wish to speak, Councillor Rush?
Yeah, I was just, sorry, I'll be very quick. I guess my concern is that what I'm not seeing here is any attempt to address items of the capital program, and I know politically that's difficult, but without doubt that's where the problem is. I think the Mayor alluded to that. One of the things I did notice is that there are elements of our program that should be funded by NZTA but aren't, and I would have liked to have seen some explanation as to why they aren't, what we can do in order to get that funding, whether it be different types of enhancements or scheduling. So I think that there's an opportunity missed, which I will hopefully work with officers to maybe understand a little bit better before this comes back to us. That's all.
Thanks, Councillor. Well, just very briefly, that amendment to the substantive to look at any opportunities for reducing rates from the forecast 9.1 is really in response to councillors and the Mayor asking us to do that. So, and I think it is my preference that that be broad and not limited at this point, because it's really just, you know, to have a look and see if there are any options and come back with those. So if that framework isn't enough, Councillor Calvert, we can take it separately and you could vote against it. But that's the way it is going in the paper at this point. So I will move it. What would people like to take separately? I've heard number 5. Is there anything else? No? Shall we take number 5 and then do the rest of the paper?
Sorry, can we take number 13 separately? Please.
Yes, 5 and 13. Okay, so we'll do number 5 first. If you could, is that all right, officers? Officer Johnson, you there?
Yes, that works well.
Okay, number 5.
That vote is lost with 5 votes in favour and 8 against, with councillors Foon, Pannett, Paul, Rush and Deputy Mayor Free in favour.
All right, so if we go to number 13, can we have a look at that one on screen? Oh yes, so that's just going back to Councillor Foon's amendment. So we'll vote on those as a block.
That is carried with 9 votes in favour and 4 against. Councillors Young, Calvert, Condi and Rush against.
Okay, and then we will vote on the rest of the paper.
And that is carried unanimously.
Thanks, colleagues. We're all right to press on. We'll go to the residual waste paper, and I'd like to welcome Siobhan Proctor, who's going to speak to the report and take your questions.
Kia ora, councillors. So I have with me Emma Richardson, who's our Waste Strategy Manager, Rob Hon, our Landfill Operations Manager, and online we've also got Eleanor Grant from Becca, who has helped us with this multi-criteria assessment process. So this paper proposes the range of options that we would like to consult on in the annual plan for the residual waste disposal. So back in October, you may recall a paper came to the Infrastructure Committee outlining a range of technical waste reduction options, and that paper concluded that no matter what you did in this area, you'd still need a residual waste disposal option. Essentially, we're proposing, well, the paper proposed 4 options: closure, piggyback option, which is a brownfield expansion, the stage 4, which was the full noise expansion, and an energy from waste option as well. With the working party, which was made up from community representatives as well as industry, we've worked through the criteria by which we've assessed these options and come up with a preferred option of this piggyback option. We do need to consult via the annual plan because one of the options, the closure, would result in quite a significant change. Therefore, we do need to consult via the annual plan on all of these options. So this paper really is just seeking approval to consult via the annual plan on there will be 3 options because stage 4 is no longer viable, it's no longer reasonably practicable because we don't have time to do stage 4. So essentially, this is asking that we consult on 3 of those residual waste options. So happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Day.
Kia ora. So these questions won't be a surprise for you, Siobhan. Thank you very much for your answers today, but I think it's important that I give you the chance to be able to answer it here. And it's really around the engagement process with mana whenua, and just in the paper, which I think recorded very well the desires and the challenges, but maybe not so much of how the challenge is being worked through. Just a little bit of an explanation about how that is being addressed, because like I addressed in the last paper, there is a bit of a challenge around that constant, we're asking for more resource and then there's not enough, and just how you're planning to work through that process to support mana whenua so that their voice is heard and making sure that they get the opportunity to participate.
Yeah. So obviously it's really important that we partner with mana whenua on this. We have struggled to engage with mana whenua given their resource constraints. So we have managed to talk to both Taranaki Whanui and Ngāti Toa in the last month or so, and we will be supporting them by providing financial support to enable them to have a consultant work on this with us. So this is for the residual waste, but also for the development of the waste minimisation and management plan as well, to make sure that we get that ongoing engagement and partnership throughout the planning process.
So I guess just the question to confirm is there enough resource to be able to make sure that we can cover this adequately?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Kia ora.
Councillor Calvert.
Yes, mine's just really about, I know this is not the consultation document and you'll be working on that, whatever's determined. But just has there been some thinking into how you can explain it in a simple way in terms of the options, because it's, I must admit, I didn't read every single page of this report. And I just think it's a lot of information for people to get their heads around. So I just really, I suppose I'm looking for assurance that when we come to consultation, there'll be a Bible and then there'll be a short version.
Yeah, so we have worked with our communication engagement team closely on this consultation material. It will be simplified and made as simple as possible. And in essence, whilst yes, the report and the reports leading up to this, there was some complexity. I think we've driven for some clarity. So it's really just looking at those 3 options associated with landfill. So we're really keeping it to those bare basics.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Foster.
Yeah, look, thank you. 3 questions if I can. The first one of them is the elimination of stage 4. That basically, because I thought we were going to eliminate that a while ago, but you in the last time I think we talked about it, you said that that we had potential to be able to above ground effectively the stream, which is only possible by going further up the valley. So you've obviously decided that the issues around timing, consenting, etc., outweigh and environmental impacts outweigh that particular environmental positive.
Hi, hello, Maherehere Foster. Yes, we have essentially.
Yeah, and that's by some considerable margin, I presume.
Yes, looking at the stage 4, if we were to be able to construct it in time for the consent expiry in 2026, we should have started it quite a wee while ago.
Okay, so look, given that's the answer, I just want to explore that just a fraction further. So, is that the key driver, the timing, or would it have been, hey, no, we wouldn't have gone that way anyway?
So, at this, one of the issues is the consentability of it and the risk of consenting. Reclaiming the stream is a very, very high bar we set, and that's one of the main issues of why we've decided it's no longer practical. The other option we have as well, the other issue we're dealing with is current volumes for the area that we have for filling is likely to be full by 2026 anyway, by the time of it.
That goes back to the timing, so yeah, okay, cool. The second one was, and it's the feedback that I've had from the community working party is that, they are going, yes, we understand practical approach, yes, there is a need to have some landfill space, but sitting alongside that is the need to make sure we've got a clear pathway that we're going to seek to minimise waste. Would it be helpful to actually include that? I mean, well, first of all, that concept is going to be included in the engagement process, I'm sure, but would it be helpful to include that concept in the recommendations that we pass?
We'll just have Emma speak to that.
Hi. Sorry about that. We have taken out all of the options that were previously identified in the October report that effectively reduce waste but don't provide a solution to waste disposal, and referred those on to a business case process that the Infrastructure Committee will be considering in March. So the timing does relatively align together, but what we'll be asking from the Infrastructure Committee in March is to consider all of the options for resource recovery, potentially appropriate for Wellington City, and to set the strategic direction for the way forward for that. So that process remains ongoing.
So is there any necessity, or does it not really matter, including a resolution today that actually reflects that there will be work being done on waste minimisation to sit alongside of the consent application?
So on that, sorry.
I think I presume you're in the same room as Emma. So yeah. Can't hear you.
You're on mute, Siobhan.
You've muted yourself. Both of you.
Sorry. In terms of a resolution, there's a lot of resolutions leading up to this from October and December. I think it would risk confusing things further. We have got a resolution to come back and bring the waste minimisation plan back. Okay. So yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. And look, just finally, in all this, is there a business case around the whole way in which waste is going to work? And look, I may have missed it. The way in which waste is going to work and be funded, given the changes that are occurring. And obviously, as we go to create a new landfill, the piggyback, we're still aiming to produce to put a lot less waste into it, which means less revenue, which means less to afford to pay for all the various other things that we're doing in the waste area, including recycling, etc. Have we actually worked up a business case for that looks like? And there's a degree probably of crystal ball gazing in terms of what services we do and do not provide.
I think the you know, as the waste reduces over time, there will be a drop of landfill revenue, and we are working through a financial policy this year that will come back to the infrastructure committee that will address that. And yeah, I think there is a certain level of, we need the council's feedback on the strategic waste resource recovery options and get a really clear direction of what you want to do before we can really get a better understanding of when those waste reductions will take place.
There's every likelihood that we will not have sufficient revenue from landfill and any government levies being remitted back to us to pay for all the waste minimisation things that we're proposing to do.
Well, the levy is set to increase significantly, even though our waste intake will hopefully drop over the next 15 years. So that will sort of balance it, themselves out. So I don't think there's immediate risk of that, but long term that will be something we need to think about, as will all the other TAs and central government.
At the appropriate time, I'd be interested in what those kind of numbers look like. Cool, thank you.
Councillor Phone. There you are.
Kia ora, Councillor Matthews. Sorry, I may have missed something.
You got your hand up to ask a question?
Yes, but actually, can Deputy Mayor Free go ahead of me, please? Just thank you.
Deputy Mayor Free.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work done on this, Siobhan and your team. It's really quite a massive amount of work. I guess the piggyback option, I mean, I know we've been talking about it for a little while as a possibility, but given that the stream's still going to be underneath everything, I would just like to hear some extra reassurance that all the calculations that are necessary have been done, and we're not going to end up with some kind of horrible disaster with water and stream and slip or whatever might happen.
Hello, Deputy Mayor. Part of the design will accommodate that. The tunnel, we inspect it once every 5 years and immediately after an earthquake as well, within reason. And so far we've come through the tunnel in very, very good condition. So yes, I give you assurance.
Yeah, even allowing for extra weight to go up on it and all of that sort of stuff. Okay, yes. Good. Thank you. That's really what I wanted to know. I guess I've got another question, but it's a bit more into the future, is how do we actually, it's a bit of a policy one, how do we actually make sure we do reduce waste? But I guess that's for another time.
I think that's a thesis.
It is a thesis, but in New Plymouth, where my son lives, they pay about 4 times that we pay to take stuff to the tip.
All right,
so that'll be part of the waste minimisation and management plan that everyone in the team are developing.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Foon, are you ready with your question?
Hi. Okay, just a quick one. Paragraph 71, just for clarification, just mentions 80% of energy is generated by fossil fuels. So just want a correction or direction on that.
Yeah, that was an error from our side. It should be.
Can't hear.
Yeah, it should be 20% actually comes from fossil fuel. 20%, not 80%. Apologies for that.
No, all good. Just need to pick these things up publicly. Another one is just in the minutes, just being at the meeting, I noted that the community were very keen to be involved with the resource consent process and design. So how can they do that? How will they be able to be involved?
So part of our planning for the resource consent process is to include points of interaction with the local community groups. So it's built in. We're a bit concerned, particularly around the involvement of these groups on the technical aspects of the landfill design itself, because we want to ensure that liability stays with the experts, but we're quite happy to be open-minded enough if they come up with good suggestions. Thank you.
Great. just also going through the papers, like airspace is an issue. What is it that we are doing at the Southern Landfill to minimise the use of airspace, i.e. filling up the landfill too fast? And have we got any plans to further reduce this?
In terms of what we're doing, in terms of technically, we're applying an alternative daily cover. It's a spray-on cover instead of the actual earth covering that we have to put on top of the waste every day. That should save us about 10%, potentially more. In terms of what we're doing from the perspective of waste minimization, the bylaws come in now. We have provided extra bins for those who want to recycle and recover the cardboard. We've also priced ourselves well in terms of things like what's the polystyrene. We're currently charging 2,500 bucks a ton for that. That's a very big number. We are trying to not take it essentially. However, we do recognize that there are not a lot of local solutions for recovering it and reusing it.
Okay. Just two more questions. One is, have we had a chance to discuss with iwi about the close the landfill option?
So the conversations with iwi and our interactions remain ongoing, and that will form part of those discussions. Absolutely.
Okay, so that will come back in the consultation process. Okay.
And throughout the process, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then the last question, just I note that the timing of the sludge drying plant in 2026 and the timing of getting the piggyback extension, provided that that's what the community wants and the council chooses. Are we nervous about the crossover there in terms of tight timeframes? And have we got enough contingency in that strategy?
So are we nervous? Yes, it's a risk, but it's with all projects. You know, we are acutely aware of it and managing it. So at the moment, the timeline we're working to, which has a fair amount of contingency built into it, has us commissioning that plant in the first quarter of 2026, calendar quarter. And so there's not a huge amount of leeway there, but we've got a very strong project team on this. So whilst, yes, it's a worry, I'm confident that we can manage it.
Phew. I hope I'm around to celebrate.
Thanks, Councillor Foon. Now, I just want to check in. Do we need another 5-minute break before we discuss this paper? Yes, okay. In fact, we'll do 8 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever it is, and come back at 1:45. Thanks, colleagues. See you shortly. And colleagues, if you do want to switch your video on when you're back.
Doing a great job, Rebecca.
Thank you, Sarah. The comedian at the beginning, that wasn't.
Oh my goodness.
I thought it was real.
I'm sorry, but I thought that was very distasteful. If it was a prank, it was really distasteful.
Horrible, yeah.
I've never encountered anything so distasteful and vulgar in my life.
He does it all over the world, apparently. He's of, you know, it's, yeah. Anyway, we got through it. All right, how many do we have? Oh, we've still got a minute to go.
It's probably true, actually. I probably have never encountered anything so actually distasteful. I was trying to...
You did really well, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, the thing is, I started off thinking, is this guy for real? And then I thought, well, maybe he is. But I didn't know about the comedian side of it.
Yes, it's funny what counts as comedy. All right, we've got, it seems like we've nearly got everybody back, so we'll go back to live streaming. And I will pass over to Councillor Foon, who's going to move this paper.
Yay, thank you, Madam Chair. Great job you are doing. Now look, this is a really interesting one for me. I can't say it is my pleasure to move this paper, but in a way, I'm going to say it is, because this conversation is moving on. And since I've been in council, this has also been one of the main things holding the portfolio for waste minimisation for Wellington. That has been a real stumbling block for our city on how we move forward in the reduction of the 6% emissions that our waste habit is causing us, as well as the environment impact that our landfill does have. And we're well aware of the impacts around our stream and our Maherehere. But today, I think the great news about this is I think the council have done a good job. Our officers have worked with the community. They have got a really thorough series of I'm looking for the word, the organisations that have helped us to come out with these results. So what we are asking for here is that we are approving the shortlist of the piggyback option, waste to energy and the landfill closure to go out to the public with and discuss with them what they think council should be doing. So yes, I'm comfortable with this, but not happy. And just to go over the shortlist that council have bringing to us today, the piggyback option is council's, as we're asking that this be our preferred option. And this is because this option has a shorter lifespan. It can cope with the scale. So if we can massively start to reduce our waste with the help of government and systems that we put in place, and the infrastructure that supports reduction and helps us move to a circular economy. And the closure of the landfill is another option. I know that many of us are out in our community are actually very repulsed by this. And we also know that other landfills are not really welcoming of Wellington's waste to go into their landfill. And also the other option that's come up, which I'm still surprised at, but the waste to energy option. And it was tempting to ask to have this removed, but in consultation with speaking with the community, we are comfortable to have a mature discussion with Wellingtonians about a waste to energy option for Wellington, even though we won't move it to possibly move it to Kandala to heat the pool. But we see that this could have some benefit to have this discussion nationally so that others can learn from the discussion that we have as a city. And just acknowledging that stage 4 is now not on the list as asked by Mayor Foster due to timing, the impact on our national environment, and also more recently the Te Kopaho tracks. I really don't think this is something that we want to show as a city that we've extended our landfill when we've got more and more people using our town belt. So I just want to touch on the community workshops. These are possibly some of the most challenging workshops I've actually been in, but I want to commend Wellington Council officers and the community for coming to have these discussions. I think they generally fell short of what we were wanting to happen, but it was still really useful that these conversations went ahead, because they discussed, and I think the community didn't really want to go down the multi-criteria analysis discussion, because they really wanted to talk about the minimisation strategy that would inform the residual waste decision. And so what we're having to do here is make that residual waste decision ahead of the waste minimisation strategy. So that is fair, and that is something we've been pushing for, but at least now they're starting to run in tandem. But what I saw was that there were challenging decades of miscommunication with the council and community that were able to be unearthed, and I am hoping that good trustful relationships will be able to be bridged and move forward. And I know that the community are really keen to work with council on the waste minimisation strategy. So the next stage is taking this out to consultation. And I think this is a really important part of the picture. So I will be looking closely at the papers on March 8th and how we're talking about this so that the community can understand, as Councillor Calvert pointed out, that it's simplified, but we are very clear on the advantages and disadvantages of each of these options. But actually, this is the chance to engage the community in a conversation about how we make this vital change, along with partners and along with government. And just to remind ourselves that New Zealand is one of the worst waste producers on the planet. And also to outline what's to come, so the community knows that council is working seriously on this. So like I say, I am comfortable. I'm exhausted by this conversation. It has been 2 hard years of really working with officers and community to try and find alternatives. But what I'm wanting to do now is get on with moving forward, focus on having this conversation with Wellington, build partnerships and collaborations with iwi who are wanting to work on waste minimisation, and moving as a city toward the circular economy. So it's not over yet, but this is the next stage in moving forward. And I thank you, Councillor Day, for seconding, and we've pulled in another amendment from Councillor Day into the substantive, and Councillor Day will speak to that. Thank you to all the officers for your work on this. I really appreciate it. And I know Wellington will appreciate your thoroughness as well.
Thank you, Councillor Foon. Councillor Day, would you like to speak now?
Yes, so I'd just like to begin by thanking Councillor Foon for her very comprehensive introduction. I don't think I need to go into the detail like you did, Councillor Foon, but I do want to acknowledge and thank you for your mahi on this over the last few years. I know it has certainly consumed a lot of your energy. And I do just also want to acknowledge the staff for a very comprehensive, honest paper. I felt that after reading the paper, I had a better understanding of the challenges, the options, and the different opinions that are out there in the community. And I think it's really important as a governor to be able to understand that and to have a clear idea of how these recommendations have come together. So thank you very much for that. As Councillor Foon has said, I've asked if this new number 9 can be added. And as much as anything, it's just to make sure that it's really clear to the community that there has been a loop that's been acknowledged, and you know that there's some response that's happening that's formalised. I want to acknowledge the work of the Working Party and the importance that they continually raise through reading through the minutes for the involvement of mana whenua and a Te Ao Māori perspective, and it came through on a number of occasions. I can see through those meetings. So there was obviously a very high emphasis put in there, and maybe a little bit of concern as to how council was going to respond and make that happen. And so with the paper, I found it really good that that was identified really clearly, and that, you know, staff are really trying to grapple with how to make that work. But one thing that I couldn't sort of see through the paper was that we were definitely had the adequate resource to be able to make sure that we were going to make the most of the opportunity. And it is about making sure there's adequate resourcing, because it would be a shame to get to the end and go, oh, if we'd only had a bit more resource, we could have actually explored that further. And through, as the Mayor said earlier in this meeting, mana whenua have said that this is an important area for them, you know, that the environment is a space that they want to really be actively participating in. and that we need to make sure that we're prepared for that. And I think I sort of feel like we are stuck in a bit of a loop where we come back and we have this report back where mana whenua are saying, well, we do want to be involved, but we don't have the resourcing. And I do think there needs to be a broader conversation. And I know that Karepa and team are really looking at this. And, you know, we do need to be having this conversation regionally as well around how we can pull together a clearer understanding of what the breadth of work is that this council is asking for, and Pūroro and Lower Hutt, and Upper Hutt potentially as well, so that we can actually say, well, look, we've actually got enough work here to be able to give people some, a job to be able to respond to this. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting this process of, well, we haven't really got anyone here right now who can do that because we haven't built up that resource. So I think we need to play a part in making that easy for mana whenua to be able to look across the board, see what's coming, and then be able to resource up. And I think that the staff are looking at that from what I can hear. And so I really appreciate Siobhan and Karepa, your response today, just reassuring that that is the way that we're going forward. Yeah, as I say, I just want to make sure that we are doing everything at a governance level that we can, that we're providing the right resource and that we're agreeing to that, so that staff can make sure that they move forward knowing confidently that mana whenua are going to be able to be supported. So I'm going to leave it there and thank people for their support in advance. Kia ora.
Right. He take hei tau patupatu. Is there any debate? No, it doesn't seem there is any. No, nobody wishes to speak to this. Okay. Oh, Councillor Pannett, off you go.
Thank you. And I don't need to speak long because Councillors Foon and Day have done a great job. I too would like to thank the community for their efforts. I take their advice on board with, seriously, and I of course appreciate Councillor Foon's very strenuous efforts in this space. Councillor Foon, I think you used the word repulsed, or was it repugnant? Anyway, yes, I am holding my nose, or am I swallowing a dead rat? I'm not sure how I will vote at the end on this one, but I'm happy for it to go up for consultation given the results. But really, let's not let ourselves off the hook. This is not good enough. In a climate and ecological emergency, we should not be expanding or doing any expansion of the landfill. And I guess my previously I had got through the regional waste plan that we do look at how many landfills we have in the region. Unfortunately, that conversation has been too difficult to be had because, like parking, we make money out of the landfill, out of bad environmental activity. So I think that conversation still needs to be had. Councillor Foon, I'd continue to support you to press that one. It just really is too many landfills, and we have to decouple council revenue from bad environmental activities, as I say. But anyway, some work's been done. Let's get on with it. And I look forward to actually seeing serious moves towards the circular economy. Councillor Foon and I have battled on this front, and it will be good to see some real progress. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Pannett, and it's also nice to have your dogs contribute to the debate again. Mayor Foster.
Very good. Very good. Look, I want to start off just by saying thank you to Councillor Pannett. Thank you to the officers for all the hard work. But Councillor Pannett, thank you for your consistent championing of waste minimisation of the economy, and that's language which you'll see appearing, for example, will be in our new economic draft economic wellbeing strategy. That's included in there as well. So I just want to say thank you for the hard work you've done over the last couple of years on that. Look, I think we're setting our city up really, really well for the future with the work that's coming together here with not only the landfill, but the landfill is a reduced scale of expansion than what was originally proposed. Stage 4 was a much bigger proposition, and you've heard that we've decided that's the piggyback option is what we're going for it. So it's a smaller landfill extension. So, but bringing that together with waste minimisation. And there's obviously a lot more that we can do, but I think we will get there with that. And also with sludge treatment, we have to get that sludge treatment sorted out so that we can actually reduce the scale of the landfill. And so bringing all of those three together, I think puts our city in a much better space than we started the triennium in, and I think we're tackling those big issues all together. And if you look at our strategic direction, which is based on strategic vision based on sustainability, well, that is what these things are all about. we've got to recognise that human beings have always created waste, but we've got to try and reduce the level of waste we produce significantly. Creativity, so there's a lot of creativity involved in bringing all these solutions together, and inclusiveness. And what I like here is we are working with the community, we're working with mana whenua to find a solution. And I think the community here is being very pragmatic. We went to a meeting at the Whare Bay School late last year, and I thought the feedback that we got was quite a pragmatic response, demanding that we did better, but also saying, actually, this is all of our problem. It's not just a council problem, it's all of our problem, because we are all consumers of products and creators of waste, our business communities, our residential communities, and so recognising that everybody is part of the problem and also part of the solution. And I think they've been quite pragmatic, saying, yep, we can work with this level of extension, but it needs to be hand in hand with a waste minimisation approach, which is exactly what we're going to do. And I just want to say thanks to everybody. But this is something which, right at the start of the triennium, was an issue that I certainly talked to you about. I know that a number of you had it in mind as well. That's one of the big challenges which we needed to tackle. That's before the water pipes started falling apart. But we always said this is one of the challenges that we needed to face up to, and that's exactly what we're doing. So well done, everybody, and looking forward to moving on to the next stage.
Deputy Mayor Free.
Thank you. Look, I think we owe a huge debt of gratitude actually to Councillor Poon and Councillor Bennett and others who really advocated for this. But I think for me, actually, Councillor Poon has just been so steadfast in saying it's not acceptable. What's going on is completely not acceptable. And of course, you hear it from the people in your ward as well, but you've still, I think it comes from a deeper place than that. It's, for me, I look back on the break in the Mount Albert Tunnel, which seemed like such a disaster and a really unfortunate thing. It was horrible. But what it did highlight and put completely out there was how much sludge we were trucking around to go into our landfill, and how unsustainable a model it really was. It's pretty, as you said, repugnant to think about what we've been putting into our hillsides and our gullies. But facing up to it, there was no way around actually acknowledging what was happening, and we have to do better. I think it's a great report. Thank you to the officers. There's clearly a heap of work being done, and I think setting out the options shows that just how much has been thought about. Nobody could say that we haven't canvassed the whole range of solutions and come to a preferred one. And I think there's a really good chance that our communities will accept that there's been a lot of work done, and the recommendation we're putting in front of them is actually probably the best we can do at this current time. But I do think this is a warning shot that we can't keep living the way we're living. There's a lot of levers that need to be pulled if we're going to really get a circular economy, or just even reduce our waste to a fraction of what it is now. There's some things are under our control, but a lot of other things need to be done too by central government. And as I said, we've actually had the luxury of a very cheap tip fees. It costs us about $12 if we want to take a carload of stuff to the tip. My son told me he pays over $50 for the same quantity, and that's because in Plymouth they have to have a transfer station. They don't actually have a place to put their own waste, so it has to be trucked somewhere else. And that's the future we'll be looking at too. So we really want to make sure that this precious, I wouldn't say it's a precious resource, but it is a resource we've got, this landfill and this extension. We really want to make sure it lasts as long as it possibly can.
Thank you. Councillor Foon, would you like a right of reply?
Hell yeah. I'd like to just thank Councillor Day for working on your amendment. It's really important that we solve the greater issue, but actually it's really good to know that we've got this particular one sorted out in terms of supporting iwi to work on us with the waste challenges, residual and waste minimisation opportunity. Mayor Foster, thank you very much for acknowledging the community's pragmatism. They have been very pragmatic and very patient. And so I really want to reach out and thank all of them, and really contributing. Like people are working so hard for nothing, because they believe deeply that we can be doing better as a city, and they want us to lead in that. And we can see the enthusiasm coming from so many businesses and startups, and we're funding them through the Waste Minimisation Fund, and they are working because Wellington is supporting them. So just while we're there, just in your papers, the next profile, organic waste is 39% and timber are 15% of what makes up our landfill. So those are the two things that we may be needing to find extra funding for down the track. So just keep that top of mind. I do want to bring up the vision that the Pūroro community brought to us when Mayor Foster and Councillor Fitzsimons and I were there, that they see the southern landfill as a taonga. It's surrounded by native bush and manu, and it is only used when absolutely necessary. And I just think it's so beautiful that that community, as hard as it is on them, can actually see that as a city it's needed, but we need to treat it more preciously. And I'd like to conclude by a friend who recommended a book to me. She said it is 21 Tips for the 21st Century. Councillor Matthews, you've likely read it already. But then she said, oh, actually, I can summarise it for you. Tip number 1, the only tip, don't buy stuff you don't need. So kia ora tātou, thank you to the officers, and hopefully we can keep progressing this situation and look forward to hear what our community have to tell us.
Thank you so much, Councillor Foon. We'll now go to the vote. Is there anything anybody would like taken separately? Hopefully not. No, okay. We'll have, I see you're voting.
And that is carried unanimously.
Great, thank you. And now we're going to move to the forward program very briefly. And I'll go to Stephen for this. I also just want to acknowledge that today, with some key people, key staff unavailable, the work that's gone into making this meeting happen. I want to say how much that's appreciated. Off you go, Stephen.
Kia ora, sorry, I was just reaching for my unmute button. Look, there's not too much to say. We've got 2 meetings, one on the 8th and one at the end of March. The one at the end of March is to adopt the draft consultation document. So hence that pressure to get things sorted leading up to the 8th so that the audit can take place. So look, that's it in a nutshell. I would just say to councillors that any kind of questions or other issues that you might want to raise ahead of the 8th of March would be really helpful, so that we're in a good position to deal with that on the day. But you'll probably, once you see the report for the 8th of March, that might create some questions in your mind. So we'll be very open to having that in advance to lead to a relatively smooth meeting on the 8th of March, because we are under quite a tight time frame. So that's it from me.
Are there any questions, councillors? I don't see any. Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor O'Neill, and we'll vote.
That one's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for all your work today. And I would now like to close the meeting with the karakia. Unihia, unihia, unihia ki te uru tapinui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatu. Koi ara e rongo, whakaaria aki ki runga. Kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Enjoy the rest of the day, and may there be no comedian pranksters as part of it.
Great work, Chair.
Thank you, everyone.